So, hello everybody, Kiara here, June 3rd, 2020. So, welcome to all of you from wherever you are in the world. So, what are we going to do today? There was a question someone was asking last night about how do we deal with attacks from the dark forces. And it's a good question, and I think we need to understand what that means, and we need to know how we can protect ourselves and what that means, and learn also how we can complete the mission that we came here to accomplish. So these are important questions, and I'll see what I can do to answer that. It's not something that has an easy answer. We must begin to approach this from multiple perspectives. So all of us have dealt with one aspect or the other of what we might perceive as an attack. Sometimes it's multiple, sometimes it has to do with astrological factors, sometimes it has to do with what our soul is calling forth in order to grow. Sometimes it has to do with global events and transitions that we are making together. Sometimes it's a direct reflection, and sometimes it's indirect. So let's first begin to understand what dark forces actually means. From a divine perspective, from the infinite perspective, there is no such thing. It's if there was an evil that was equally strong as good, then we basically have duality at the heart of all things, and that means the divine itself has qualities of both, and that's not real. We have the infinite consciousness involved within creation, but that doesn't mean that God or the infinite consciousness or creator actually creates evil or creates dark forces. Anything that is not in its right order becomes dark. Anything we're moving away from and moving towards is relative dark and light. And because we're dealing with a massive shift in consciousness, and there's this enormous influx of light, it also means that everything that's in reaction to this light, everything that we've buried within ourselves that we find it difficult to face, that we tend to project on other people or global circumstances, anything, anywhere outside of ourselves, that then turns around, appears as something evil, and then creates a form and a shape to manifest that. So from a third dimensional dualistic perspective, yes, evil is real. And from that perspective, we can be directly influenced by this. We're not all-powerful in this dimension, and we need to be watchful. We need to learn tools to protect ourselves. Much of this has to do with awareness of our own emotional stuff, awareness of our etheric body, our prana system, and how we can prevent ourselves and protect ourselves from being inundated by energies that are out of balance. And if we look around us in this world, it's obvious that we are dealing with dark forces in political, economic, social realms. these dark forces are very much tied in to our human evolutionary journey. And when I say human, I'm also perhaps referring to other extraterrestrial races and beings that are tied in to this particular race. But it's a very relative thing. Darkness, evil, resistance of these ignorant forces is an aspect of creation that's here to propel us, to push us, to move us into something greater than what we've experienced. Otherwise, we're simply too content to sit on our butts and not do anything. Unfortunately so. It's like sometimes we need that resistance, that opposition to move us forward into what we're here to actually accomplish, which is a polarity. Not duality, but a polarity. It's created through polarity. So any next step in evolution requires a challenge, requires a crisis. And that crisis can be seen in terms of darkness, because we're used to looking at things from that perception. So let's change that perception. Let's move out from feeling like we're victimized, living in a world of duality where a dark side exists opposite to a light side and threatens to overcome the light, or vice versa, to recognize that they're aspects of one force. Even if something appears in this dimension to be dark. So you might have people that have agendas that are evil. You might have situations going on like war, like hunger, like injustice, greed, all these forces that are oppressing and suppressing human consciousness and destroying the life of the earth. Yes, on a certain perspective, these are evil. And we must recognize that in order to step forward in our own truth. To be content with that, simply imagining that it's not up to us, or that it's all karmic, or that it's someone else's responsibility, is avoiding the issue. The question is, how do we step in? Do we step in from a place of opposition, or do we step in from a place of inner empowerment that recognizes that all of this is an aspect of truth, and that we're moving from relative truth into a deeper truth, and we are part of this truth consciousness that is now in creation. So it requires basically stepping into a fullness in our power. To some extent, it requires also that we deal with our own pain, our own suffering, our own process, our own inner conflicts, rather than projecting, which we've always seemed to have done. We project our own stories and our own dramas on other beings, whether it be parents, society, political systems, left or right, whether it be some group of overlords that are here to enslave us. All these are stories that may or may not be real from a certain perspective. But if we make it real in terms of giving our power over to this story, then we're lost. Because all of this is about forcing us into a place where we learn to empower ourselves in our own truth. And for this, everything is allowed. Nature, creation, the human evolutionary process is designed to take us through the limitations that we have created within our species to break us out into new possibilities that we haven't imagined yet. And at this stage of our evolution, the only way that we seem to be able to do this is through these oppositional forces. Not always and not with everybody. We can also enter into a lifestyle where we simply grow in joy, in grace, in beauty, in love. Yes, that's certainly possible. And if we manage to take responsibility for ourselves fully, that is our reality. No matter what else is going on the outside. Then we project this inner reality into the world on the outside, and creation manifests accordingly. Remember also that time operates very differently in different dimensions of reality. And if there's a dimension where time seems to be much slower, like this timeline we mostly exist in, then it takes time to transform something, transmute something, change something, and we don't see the results of that immediately. When we enter into a different timeline that has to do with higher dimensional awarenesses, then things happen more quickly as we ally with that wholeness that we are. That imprint manifests much more quickly in the world around us, in people and circumstances in life and global events. So this is how we change the world. And how do we confront the dark forces? All right, first is to recognize what is really going on. To recognize that on a certain level of reality, there's injustice, there's suffering, and there's greed. These forces that are here to with their own agendas. To become aware of this, to recognize this is important. Otherwise, it's simply a Pollyannic spirituality with our heads in the sands and escaping into an idea of what it is to be human, what it is to be divine. And if it was ever real, it's not true anymore, because now it's up to us to be fully present to the world. It's not just enough to go through our own healing journey or our own spiritual journey, as if enlightenment is something that can be separated from the rest of creation, as if it takes us into a deeper level of separation rather than wholeness. That's not what enlightenment is or ever was. It's not what a spiritual path is about. It's about facing ourselves, confronting the darkness within, and then connecting with an aspect of us that's beyond duality, so that that wholeness can come through and change the world around us. Meanwhile, when people talk about being attacked by dark forces, what does that mean? Sometimes it means that there's literally entities that are lost, that are stuck in lower astral realms, that are here on this earth seeking self-serving activities through manipulating other people and their emotional states. We are only susceptible to this when we think that someone outside of us can hurt us, harm us, or take something away from us. When we are trapped in a cycle of fear, we attract that into our lives, in order to meet the truth and to transmute the illusion. So yes, sometimes we're going to experience these so-called dark forces as lost entities. Sometimes we're going to experience this as beings that are here from other dimensions or other star systems who have a certain agenda in mind. This is not the majority of beings in the universe, by far not. But just like it only takes a few humans to make life miserable for the majority. So it is with these other so-called dark entities or races. So yes, it's a complicated question. And what is a protection? It's always and always has been the truth. To recognize what is true and what is illusion, to not give power to an illusion, and to step into the fullness of our inner truth, which means the divinity within us, beyond qualities, which also means beyond any idea of being outside of this process. So in terms of protection, I know there's a lot of people who talk about working to strengthen the aura, to create symbols and use different mantras, or sure, all that works. It's fine if it works for you. Ultimately, it's about opening doorways between the worlds so we're not trapped in a dimensional reality which experiences duality as its prime reality. Yes, we are in a world of duality. At the same time, we are in a world that is far, far, far beyond this illusion of right and wrong, good and bad, hurt and pain. So, with all the events going on in the world right now, we're being forced to understand who we are and to take a stance for that. We're being forced to move into wholeness so we can address what's going on around us from a place of empowerment rather than of victimization. The time of the victim is over, and until we truly, deeply understand that and know that, we will continue to experience victimization on both sides, as the oppressor and as the victim. They're not two separate things. And we could go into all kinds of examples about how the victim becomes the oppressor, and the oppressor creates more victims. It's a cycle that perpetuates itself, and it's important not to identify with any aspect of this cycle, to step outside of that cycle and then learn what mastery is about. So as you can tell, I'm in a rather more serious mode today. There are times when I do feel a little bit upset about global realities. There's times I do feel like it could be very tempting to go into a victim position. And then those choices become even more important. To choose. And it's a choice that we make. Sometimes we don't want to make those choices. We don't feel like we're ready to make those choices. But we simply make those choices because that's the choice we need to make. So who we are as a soul is outside of our mental or emotional states. These states are temporary. They come and they go. They change all the time. I am not that. Just because I feel a certain way at a particular time, it doesn't mean that I am that. Just because I think or have a belief system, it doesn't mean I am that. Just because there are circumstances that seem to be controlling my life at this time, doesn't mean I am a victim. So let us remember first who we are, what we are, and why we are. And then we can discover the answers to that question. All right. Let me just see. Yes, like Anne-Marie says, right after my awakening, I felt that some force wanted to capture my mind and tap to my heart. It was something very old, very frightening. The only thing which helped was to know that it was a feeling and a thought, and to breathe in the here and now. So understanding what this is about, yes, this is natural and normal. As we awaken, we are going to deal with hucha, which is the resistance. Externalized resistance, which is reflected by our internal fear. And so if we can understand what that fear is about, deal with that immediately and directly by aligning with who we truly are, that changes things. And remember also that feeling something is different from becoming something. You might feel all these things, you might feel you're being constricted and attacked or vibrationally hurt. Doesn't mean that is who you are. And if you can separate that feeling from the knowing and stand fast in your knowing, it's your way out. There are times you're going to go through physical challenges in response to the light. Doesn't mean there's someone out to get you. It's simply an evolutionary challenge or crisis that's here to move us into the next phase of our development. There's a way of thinking where we become so attached to something is good, something is bad, that it's very childish. Like we tend to see reality as this polarity, this dance between dark and light, good and bad. And then we see everything that we perceive as bad as something wrong in the world and out to get us. We become the center of the world at that point. It's not about that. If we are ready for growth, if you're ready to mature, the universe is going to bring up into our life everything that we need to look at, that still holds us in a spirit of fear and immaturity. So what we do need, however, is reminders, support, so we don't fall back into the hole, into the trap of duality, fall back into the matrix that has been holding us for so many thousands of years. And sometimes the night is darkest just before the dawn. And so it may seem that things are bad and getting worse, but it's also because we're at a time when we're preparing for perhaps the greatest evolutionary leap in our known history. The 10th avatar is about knowing how to deal with the dark forces, not with an external weapon, but with inner mastery. Yes. When you're entering into that realm of the avatar consciousness, there is no darkness. You simply recognize that what appears to be darkness is your own unacknowledged love projected out there, and your own unacknowledged light and power and wisdom and beauty and truth. And once this is acknowledged, there is no darkness. It's just there long enough for us to acknowledge it, and then its job is done. Alright, so maybe that's enough of that for now. So let's take a moment to just remember who we are. So open the doorways between the worlds. Connect with earth and sky. Allow your awareness to expand. Out through the three worlds. Out into the causal worlds. Connect with the truth within. The truth consciousness that reminds us of who we truly are. And then become that point of stillness within the heart, where this truth can grow and permeate everything. All the challenges, all the hucha, all the perceptions of darkness. Opening to gratitude, understanding that all the challenges that we face now are simply so that we can grow more easily, more quickly, more powerfully. Simply because the time has come when it's needed. Simply because Gaia has called us here and chooses this time to make an evolutionary leap and needs our help. So, as we close, I want to remind you about the webinar, the 5 days, starting June 6th and 7th weekend, where we'll be exploring some of the Inca teachings and practices, followed by June 10th, 11th, and 12th, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, where we'll be going deeper into Ilahinur, Gayanur, and some of the more advanced Inca teachings. Later in the month, we'll do another couple days of more planetary related work. And so for all of this, please contact Jamie, JAMYFRENCKEN at hotmail.com. So much blessings and love across this field of living light. Recognizing that we are not alone, There's so many light beings, unified light beings, the elder brothers and sisters, nature spirits, angelic, archangelic realms. Ascended masters, all here to support us in this journey. A journey that's mostly about perception. As we change that perception, we change our realities. So thank you all. Blessings.